I will introduce here our panelists. As I said, Peter Adrian is the president of the Association of German Chambers of Industry and Commerce. On the screen here, you can see in the middle, joining us virtually is Markus Grohms. He's a member of the management board and chief human resources officer of ThyssenKrupp Steel Europe. Mr. Grohms, great to see you, and we welcome you here from the stage in Berlin. We also have Birgit Schwenk, who's the head of climate protection at the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action here in Germany. And last but not least, Suzanne Clark is the president and CEO of the US Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to all of you. Great to have you with me here on the stage for this discussion. Mr. Adrian, I wanted to start with you because the decarbonization of industry, this is a huge topic that is featured both in the B7 recommendation paper and in the G7 climate and energy communique. You have looked at both. What is your takeaway on the final outcome? Are there shortcomings that you see there?
Yeah, a good question. I think decarbonization of the industrial sector is addressed in B7 papers and also in the G7 climate and energy communique. And I think it's a good paper from the B7. And for our economy, climate neutrality is an important goal for all German companies as well as for the whole German society. So the B7 paper sets the right priorities for achieving good progress. With the use of renewable energy, we will start the process to get independent from fossil energy market. And you know, especially the German economy has not enough fossil energy, and we have to import a lot of energy. So it's also a good situation to start with the new renewable energy and get more independent from the fossil market. But the necessary transformation process, we have to overcome some high risks. These risks have to be addressed and managed. The main task is for us to reach the goal of climate neutrality together with the companies and not losing the companies, especially here in Germany. For me, the first risk is, especially here in Germany, the huge time pressure. In Germany, this is especially true because we are more ambitious than other European countries. And on the other side, especially also in Germany, bureaucracy and difficult and lengthy proceeding are obstructions for a rapid transformation process. In addition to governmental support and public investment, we need leeway for private investments. What is possible for LNG terminals must also be possible for other infrastructure investments and also for renewable energy systems in our enterprises. The second risk I see is the currently high price situation for energy. Our latest economic survey shows more than 93% of industry companies rate energy and raw material prices as one of their biggest business risks. We never recorded a higher figure. Let me tell you about this from the viewpoint of an entrepreneur. The rising costs lower the budget and make it difficult to invest. This limits the capacity for transforming our economy. And ladies and gentlemen, the third risk is the reliability supply of renewable energy. Many companies have already driven their energy efficiency to a limit. For all entrepreneurs, it is essential that political secure the supply of affordable energy. Our national production in renewable energy is not enough. We need worldwide cooperation and we need a defined market for hydrogen. In view of this challenge, we need to work together among G7 and for the Climate Club to be constituted by Europe, the US, and, if possible, China. Instead of unilateral action and trade protectionism, transformation should become a chance for international cooperation, innovation, and for worldwide better living conditions.
Thank you for that answer. Ms. Schwenk, I would like to come to you now, because we heard there that although this is an opportunity, a time to move forward on climate action, there are also many risks involved, particularly from the viewpoint of the private sector in particular. And the Climate and Economics Minister, Robert Habeck, here in Germany, who many of you are familiar with, said the following: the G7 is staying the course and sending out a powerful signal for increased climate protection, and huge steps forward were made in that direction. Was the German government, despite the war in Ukraine and the way that that has moved priorities, has it been able to achieve all the goals that were set prior to this G7 presidency?
Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me. And I have to send the apologies and best regards of my State Secretary, Dr. Patrick Reichen, who was supposed to be here but had to deal with some urgent issues. And there are a lot of urgent issues these days. We have large crises due to the Russian war of aggression, which the German government utterly and in the deepest terms condemns. And this crisis actually exacerbates other crises that we have, and not least, the climate crisis. And I have to say that I've been often asked in the last few months, while I was actually negotiating the communique of the climate and energy ministers as the head of delegation at my level, whether we now step back from our goals in respect of the climate action, and we don't. And this has been the answer in our communique of the climate and energy ministers as well. So in very strong terms, we have actually underlined that it is actually accelerating the energy transition, accelerating climate action, which has to be the answer to the crises that we have at the moment. And I'm glad to say that there was real agreement on this. This is actually the very first part of our communique that deals with this commitment. And in terms of energy, there are a number of very concrete commitments in our communique as well that we could reach among the G7. And that is that we want to go forward with moving away from fossil fuels. That goes for fossil fuel financing. Public international fossil fuel financing should be phased out by the end of this year, except in limited circumstances, which we probably have at the moment. But even then, it should be in line with a 1.5-degree pathway. Then we have actually also committed to ending fossil fuel subsidies in our own countries, and this has been a long-standing goal in the G7, ending those by 2025. And frankly, not much has been done towards this. And this year, for the very first time, we have actually managed to take concrete steps towards this goal and have actually decided on being more transparent and to start reporting on our fossil fuel subsidies also for the international community. And finally, we have committed to a predominantly decarbonized electricity sector by 2035. And we have committed, and that is actually also for the very first time, to a coal phase-out in the G7, both on the global scale and for our own countries. So in the energy area, we were actually quite happy with the results that we could achieve. But this is not the only thing that we've done. So partnering up with countries around the world, with partners in the developing world, is very important. And we've reiterated our commitment to financing, to climate action in developing countries. And we're also going to introduce more just energy transition partnerships. We already have one with South Africa that goes back to the last climate change conference of the parties in Glasgow. And we are going to commit to more such multilateral just energy transition partnerships at the summit by the end of this month. And so I think in the run-up to the summit, we are actually making good progress here. This is all also part of the climate club that Chancellor Scholz has proposed, and that we are going to work towards together with the G7. And in that climate club, we have also a number of other subjects, and one subject is helping industry move along towards also moving into a more climate-compatible world and economy, setting the right framework for that, incentivizing and actually helping along the business sector in what they're doing, I think, at the moment anyway. I think I'll leave it at that. Let me mention one more thing, which is also a very good achievement, I think, and that is that we've looked at the transport sector as well. And we have agreed that we want to have a highly decarbonized road sector by 2030. And so that's an impressive list of priorities, certainly, from the German government. And as we heard there's no plans to step back from climate commitments. So, Mr. Grolms, if I could ask you about that. At the same time, there are concerns from the industry about energy security, supply, of course. So, what role do you think international cooperation can play in this balance between the need to move forward on climate protection, but also securing energy in the short term?
Well, good morning from Duisburg. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The need of diversification of energy supply in short term and going ahead with climate protection commitments is an enormous challenge. But please let me say, we are not talking about fixing a status quo. It's very important to say very clear that our demand of energy will rapidly increase during the next years on our track of decarbonization. For example, after having transformed our hot metal capacity, we will have an energy demand which is 10 times higher than it is today. And so no doubt we at ThyssenKrupp Steel firmly believe that both energy security and climate protection cannot be reached in isolation. Of course, both must be promoted to multilateral agreements and strong partnerships. And, well, let me say, the recent months have shown in a quite painful way that the security of energy supply is a point of particular vulnerability for European industry and business. And it has been shown that strategically relevant goods should be conducted in trusting and reliable partnerships of common values. And in the pursuit of independence from Russian gas, the United States, as an exporter of liquefied natural gas, will play a central role in Europe's security of supply. And specifically on our transformation to green steel, I have to say we are building on the steady supply of natural gas as an interim solution to be replaced by green hydrogen as soon as possible. And in some way, it is an euphemism that we are building on it. We highly depend on it. Everything we are planning about decarbonization will not work without a steady supply of natural gas. And so international cooperation has never been so important like it is today.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Grolms, also for leading perfectly to my next question to Ms. Clark. With the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, of course, as the world's leading exporter of LNG, the U.S. right now has to manage this balance between helping secure this energy supply, but also meeting climate objectives, which are so important to the G7 countries. How are U.S. businesses positioned to deal with those two challenges?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here at my first B7 in person, and thank you to our hosts for putting all of this together. It's a great question, and I think one of the things we're talking about a lot in the United States is the fact that we have to stop acting like the choice between energy production and climate mitigation is binary. It's not. We can do both, we must do both. In the United States, we have to do it because of soaring energy prices and what's happening for American families and businesses. We have to do it as part of a global security, working with our allies, what it means to our allies in security, and what it means for climate mitigation. If you look at our Department of Energy, they estimate that replacing Russian gas in Europe with US LNG would reduce emissions by 72 million metric tons. That's like taking 15 million cars off the road. It's a remarkable number. We know we have our own work to do at home. We're doing work on reducing upstream emissions, working on methane. We believe technology and innovation is a big part of the solution here. We would like to work more with all of you on electric vehicles, on nuclear. There's a lot more in technology that we could do together. But I want to be really clear from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce perspective, and that is that there is a climate imperative and a security imperative to accelerate the energy transition.
Okay, so those certainly are very high on the agenda for US businesses as well. Mr. Adrian, if I'd come back to you now and ask you how you see that very same challenge of balancing climate protection, at the same time diversifying energy supply in the short term and securing energy supply, how can international cooperation, do you think, from your perspective, play a role in this?
Yeah, I think the first thing for me is we all need a quick change to climate neutrality, but on this way we have to secure reasonable energy prices, and also we have to secure enough quantity of energy, especially during the transformation process. If you see the international situation, we have the situation that in Europe we try to get very quickly on this way, and in other countries you have another situation. So we have maybe we need a cross-border adjustment mechanism. You know, the CBAM. But for me, the CBAM, it is a regulation system for the European Commission. But for me, this regulation mechanism is not enough. It is a one-way, and it will create new global trade conflicts. Therefore, I think the right way for the international agreements is a climate club with truly equalized climate costs for business, and it will be absolutely the better solution. And we have to work with this climate club to get it in a function.
Okay, and we're going to come back to that topic of a climate club in just a moment. But Ms. Schwenk, if I could ask you about low-carbon hydrogen, because this has been something that's been a big topic for G7 countries when we talk about securing energy supply as well. What is the main contribution of the Hydrogen Action Pact for the market ramp-up of hydrogen?
Yes, thank you very much. Let me first underline the dynamics that we have at the moment behind green hydrogen. This is really, I mean, I've been working for the government for more than 20 years now, and I don't think I've ever seen that kind of dynamic development as we have at the moment in the green hydrogen sector. And we are going to need green hydrogen for a number of sectors that are hard to abate, that we can't actually decarbonize by any other means, which is international aviation, international shipping, but also a number of heavy industry process emissions, as in steel or cement. So yes, we did focus a lot on hydrogen in our G7 presidency, and are still doing so. In a framework called the Industrial Development Agenda, Industrial Decarbonization Agenda, sorry. We have proposed, and this has been also accepted by the other G7, or supported by the other G7, Green Hydrogen Action Pact. And that Hydrogen Action Pact is going to, well, at first, align a number of initiatives that have been around for a while in the hydrogen sector. Because what is really important, that is at least what I've taken also from a lot of conversations with industry, that we have standardized definitions for instance, green products, green steel, green cement. This is something that we've been working on intensely. If you look at the G7 communique, I don't know whether you've had a chance to leaf through it, there is actually an annex that is detailing already such kind of definitions. And we've had a lot of help here by the International Energy Agency. The IEA has published a report called the Net Zero Heavy Industries report. We've had a lot of material here to base our work on. And I hope that with that Hydrogen Action Pact, which we are going to explore further, elaborate further in the coming years, that with this Hydrogen Action Pact, the G7 can really make a contribution to standardizing, to sending the right incentives, to having the right regulatory framework as well, because we have said that we need a policy toolbox as well here for joint action. So I hope that this very dynamic field can still be helped along even further.
How quickly do you think that can happen?
I'm sorry?
How quickly do you think that can happen? In which time frame do you think it can be moved forward in the G7?
Well, we have the presidency for another 6 months, so we are going to work on that further. We've had a number of workshops on this, and we are going to start working right away now that we have the commitment by all the G7. I know that this is also dear to our Japanese friends, and they are going to continue that work next year. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Mr. Kroms nodding during parts of that answer, especially when you were talking, Ms. Schwenk, about the need for standards for green products. So I'll come to you next, Mr. Kroms. We've talked already here on this panel a few times about a climate club. It was mentioned by the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, but only briefly addressed in the communique on energy and climate. What is your expectation from your perspective on such an alliance?
Well, a climate club needs to work towards a level playing field within the participating countries, and from our point of view, eventually lead to a harmonized minimum CO2 price and joint carbon border adjustment mechanism. But we are fully aware that this might be a little bit difficult, and however, a joint CO2 price seems rather difficult to achieve in short time. At present, the CO2 pricing systems and climate ambitions, and we know about that, differ considerably between the countries. But there are a lot of topics to discuss. And to get started, the focus of a climate club should be on partnerships, from our point of view, in 3 areas. It's about energy transition. It should be about green hydrogen and the decarbonization of CO2-intensive industries. And one goal could be to bring out roadmaps with clear milestones for the coming 3 to 5 years. And member countries could, and that would be something quite new, mandate net zero emission plans for their CO2 intensive industries. And so a climate club would be maybe in the first place become something different, but it would be a platform to agree on common definitions and standards, and that's very important for us. And it could foster the creation of green lead market, which are very important for us too, because it's completely and very important that we all know what we are talking about, and that we find common standards. But, and there's always a but, as long as there's no harmonized minimum CO2 price in place, we need to counteract the risk of carbon leakage. Also, we still need effective production preventing carbon leakage within the club and the club member countries, and we need to maintain effective carbon leakage protection within the European Union.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Gons. And if I could follow up on that with a question to you, Ms. Clark. There seems to be agreement in the B7 and G7 on the need for standards for net zero steel and cement. What are your thoughts on how market forces can respond to such common standards?
Well, I think it's part of the reason it's so important we're here, right? That we develop a common vocabulary, a common set of standards so that buyers and sellers know what they're actually trading, or you can't have progress. So whether we're talking about hydrogen or advanced building materials, that need for the B7, for business leaders to develop a common set of standards, a common set of vocabulary, so that we're sure we're actually making progress is really important.
Well, I would like to take this opportunity after that answer to invite another member of our panel who I see just waiting on the side here. This is Caroline Drischel, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer for Lufthansa. Please join us and take a seat. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. And I'll take the opportunity to ask you your first question as you're joining us here. So we can start you right into the discussion. I hope that's fair to you. We've been talking about all sorts of standards needed for different industries. Of course, aviation is important in that as well. And we've been talking about the possibility of a climate club. What are your thoughts from Lufthansa's perspective on a climate club?
Well, first of all, thank you, and thank you for having me here. Sorry for the delay. We as an airline, we strongly believe that we have to do something. And so we strongly believe that we have to join forces in whatever club is possible. So we have in the airline industry a club which is called the EA, International Aviation, IACO. I can't even pronounce it correctly. But we do believe that we need more than that, and we need to join forces. But one thing is really important. We need to join forces on a global level, because climate doesn't stop in Europe. And we have faced a situation just recently with discussing some new regulations coming up that the level playing field is not equal when we only look at Europe. We have to look at the whole world. So yes, we are in favor. Everything helps because we have to start doing something now, but we need to have an equal level playing field. So that is for us something really important.
We can imagine that meeting specific climate goals must be really difficult for the aviation industry in particular. What are the biggest challenges that your industry faces, do you think, in meeting these more ambitious climate targets?
Well, the airline industry can do something on their own. That means we have to renew aircrafts. A new aircraft is 30% less fuel consumption than an old aircraft, so we can do things on our side, but we need the industry also to help us because we need to decarbonize the kerosene. So we want to fly with sustainable aviation fuel. Just a number, if Lufthansa Group would buy every sustainable aviation fuel that is available on the market right now, we could fly a week. So we need to scale this up, and we really believe that this is a second very, very big lever when it comes to compensation and to reduction, so that's sustainable aviation fuel, and at the end we also need to compensate and bring also our customers on board. They also need to be aware of flying, but flying in a CO2 neutral way, and this is actually already possible, but we have to educate here also the customers. So it's basically a game of everyone. It's the regulations. We need to have fair regulations. We support regulations. We need the industry to scale up. We need to do our part on our side. So that's why we are buying 190 new aircrafts until the end of this decade, which is a lot for Lufthansa Group. And then also we need the customer.
Very interesting. Thank you, Ms. Drischel, for those answers. Mr. Adrian, I want to get your take on this as well, because we've heard a few things mentioned now in regards to climate clubs. We've heard the need for international harmonization, for a level playing field, that this has to be a global effort. What is your perspective on this, on how a climate club could contribute?
Okay, the example with the airline shows how important it is to get an instrument to make sure that if you get the fuel in the United States, you have not to pay so much less as you have to pay here in Germany, that you have a problem in in the situation with other airlines coming from the United States and have other conditions as we have here in Europe, especially in Germany. So the Climate Club will be the right instrument if it is possible to get an agreement between the big economic regions. For me, it's minimum. It's Europe, it's the United States of America, and it's possible China. So with these three, we have so much power that when we have it in the Climate Club, you can get agreements which will work for the whole world and will be the right base to get the transformation process quickly perfect done. So I think maybe we have other instruments, but it's very difficult to get the right solution. For me, it's clear we need the Climate Club, and we need it with these big players on the world.
What's your perspective on this, Ms. Schwenk? I mean, we've heard now that for industry, an international level playing field is so important. So how realistic do you think a Climate Club is for 2030 and beyond?
The Climate Club, as I said, is an idea that is, has been put forward by our Chancellor, and he is going to take this forward at the summit. So whatever I say is actually, well, that's to be taken with a grain of salt, since I don't know what the summit outcome will be on this one. But the Climate Club is going to rest on 3 pillars. One is partnering up with developing countries and emerging economies that are ambitious, and to actually encourage them to become even more ambitious in climate action. And that leads me directly to the second pillar. The second pillar is that we want to speak about carbon pricing. We want to make carbon pricing more comparable. That is not an easy task, because our way of doing carbon pricing here in the European Union is not shared all over the world, and not even by all the G7 countries. So we are going to look into also making comparable indirect ways of carbon pricing, for instance, in Japan, where carbon intensities are more the system that they focus on. And by making all this more comparable, by encouraging other countries to adopt similarly ambitious policies, we hope to prevent carbon leakage and also to create that level playing field. And there is, of course, a connection to the fact that in Europe we are looking into introducing a carbon border adjustment mechanism, a CBAM. And this is going to be an initiative, the Climate Club, that is complementing such efforts. And then I've spoken about 2 pillars. Now, the third pillar is actually what we've already focused on, and that's the industrial decarbonization agenda, on which, I've already spoken about. So I hope that the Climate Club will actually also help you here in the business community. Thank you.
So, Mr. Groms, we hear there are some of the promise that the Climate Club can hold, perhaps some of the challenges that it will face. We talked also about the efforts towards net zero steel and cement. And from your perspective with ThyssenKrupp, what is needed next, for the next steps rather, for global market for these products?
Well, first of all, we welcome the fact that G7 has given broad scope to the political framework of decarbonizing industry. From our point of view, of course, it's particularly important that the goal was agreed to create markets for climate-friendly base materials, including steel, in a timely manner, which means, from our point of view, within the next 3 to 4 years, which is, from a business perspective, still quite a long time, because our investment decisions we have to take now. And so we are at a point where our old technology, the blast furnaces, are exhausted, and there will be no further progress in decarbonization with our old technology. So we are planning to build up new capacities with direct reduction plants. We will replace coal by hydrogen, and there will be no CO2, which is coming out of our chimneys in 2045. There will be only water vapor, which is quite astonishing even for ourselves. And but it will be an investment of 7 billion euros, which is required to go that way. And it's quite obvious that it's impossible to do that without public subsidies. But we are running a business, and we want to run it profitable. And so, of course, the question of leading green steel markets is our central question.
Well, Ms. Schwenk here has certainly promised support.
And it's very important to push it forward on time, and it's very important to push it forward in an intense dialogue between all the countries, because it's very important in the green market that we all know what we are talking about and that there are common standards.
Thank you, Mr. Groms. And Ms. Clark, I wanted to get your take on the issue we spoke about a little bit earlier with Ms. Schwenk, which is hydrogen, and the fact that the G7 had launched this Hydrogen Action Pact. From the perspective of US industry, what role do you see hydrogen playing here in ramping up hydrogen?
Well, we are, of course, behind our good friends in Germany and Japan on hydrogen. Last year, one of the U.S. Chamber's biggest efforts was advocating for a domestic infrastructure bill. In that bill, which became law, there was $9 billion for creating hydrogen hubs around the United States. So we're now working with the Department of Energy to get that moving. We do feel that it's going to play an important role in the transition, and that we're a little behind. We have things to learn from our friends, but we're happy that that advocacy happened. One quick note I wanted to bring up while we were talking about some of the emerging markets, if you don't mind, is we've been doing a lot of work with Egypt in ramping up for COP27. And I think this conversation around both the demand side, you know, we have airline demand soaring around the world. How do we bring the demand side along, the population along, but also how we bring different parts of the developing world along in this conversation. You know, COP27's shaping up to be a very different conversation than COP26. And I think the G7 and the B7 have a really important role to play, not only in some of the technologies that we're discussing here, but also how the transition works for different economies.
Ms. Sturschel, maybe I can follow up that with a question to you on how Lufthansa sees the role of bringing developing economies along as well, with airlines in these economies, and how you can create a more level playing field, but also provide opportunities. How does that work in terms of sustainability?
I'm not sure if I got the question correctly, but I wanted to add something on hydrogen first. We also strongly believe that hydrogen is a factor, and we encourage everyone to go for it, because we need it for creating sustainable aviation fuel, not for flying hydrogen planes. Here we think we have still many years to go, because before that will be really a reality. But we really encourage the industry to support hydrogen in helping us to create sustainable aviation fuel, so the so-called e-fuels. So your question was about
airlines in developing countries, and how Ms. Clark was just talking about the need to bring developing countries along as well. If there are common standards created for airlines for the type of fuel that needs to be used, how can Lufthansa contribute to that effort?
Yeah, that's why I said we have this club, this IACO club, and we are talking to all the airlines worldwide. But to be honest, we are also in competition to each other. But we're not competition to the emerging market airlines. We are more competition to the Gulf states airlines, to be honest. With the Americans, we are pretty much friends. And I have to say, the American airlines are moving ahead when it comes to sustainability. There, the government is incentivizing it. I think this is a help. We in Europe, we try also to be on the same page when it comes to sustainability. We as Lufthansa Group, we have committed to sustainable, to the SBTI targets, Science-Based Targets Initiative, which is an NGO proof pointing how you do really your path to net zero in 2050. We will be audited here, and many airlines, and you would believe that the emerging markets airlines are behind us, but that's not true. It's really depending on where is your network, where is your destination, and then you can more or less say that the playing level, the injustice comes more or less from the Gulfstat airlines than from emerging markets, where we have sometimes the technology on site. We see there's plans for sustainable aviation fuel in Chile, for example, or we have also been talking to other countries. They are moving ahead because we all have the same issue. We want to continue flying, but in a sustainable way.
Well, we have pretty much run out of time for our panel discussion, so I think that's a good note to close on, to say we're looking to do more, but in a sustainable way, and certainly with the partnership of G7 countries. So thank you all very much for joining me here for this discussion. I think it's an important one, certainly for the G7 moving forward. As you mentioned, Ms. Schwenk, this is something that's been high on the German government's agenda for quite some time and will be a big priority for the G7 agenda, and that we'll see next week playing a big role as well. We are going to take a brief break, but I would invite you to join us again at 12 o'clock because we're going to be returning with a discussion on the future of health systems. And we'll see you back here in just a little bit at 12 o'clock for that panel discussion. So enjoy your break, and we'll see you in a moment.